This is the new Hyundai i30N, and I've been dying to get it on the channel ever since I drove the original a few years ago and instantly fell in love with it. Now this is the 2021 car, so it's a facelift. We've got a new design as well as a bit of a power boost and a new 8-speed dual clutch gearbox. However, the one that we have here is the manual, which I am very happy about. So before we get into the review and see what the new model is like, why not give us a thumbs up if you like what you see and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Part of the 2021 refresh is a rather hefty design update, and a lot of that centers around the front of the car. Now the big update that we have here is the new grille. This is Hyundai's new signature grille design, and it's actually quite a bit deeper and wider than what you got on the old car, which I always thought looked a little bit awkward and small. So this really stretches out the front of the car and gives it a real nice added bit of road presence. Now coupled with that, we've also got a new LED headlight design, which is this kind of really striking V. Again, it works really well with the overall design of the car and kind of points the design forward, so it looks like it's moving even when it's sat still. The actual updates at the back of the car are relatively light, however there are some notable changes, including, again, we've got the V signature in the tail lights, even though the actual shape of the tail lights are the same as the old car. The rear bumper also has more of this kind of black plastic, which makes it sound cheaper, but what it does is it actually, as we've got less body colour bits low down, it kind of raises the rear and gives it a bit more of an athletic look. And finally, thank goodness they've kept the dual exhaust system on here. These things are absolute rocket launchers, and they sound a little something like this. If we peel back the skin, we'll find quite a few chassis upgrades to go along with the refresh design, and they include new coil springs, new adaptive dampers, as well as revised geometry, and that's all designed to improve the quality of the ride without hampering that razor sharp precision that we got on the pre-facelift car, which could be a little bit on the harsh side. Along with that, you get the pre-facelift's electronic limited slip differential, or ELSD, which manages how power is translated to the tarmac to prevent as much torque steer as possible. That's when you put the power down and there's so much power going through the front wheels that it steers all over the place. The pre-facelift was really good at eliminating that. And if you go for the car with the 8-speed dual clutch gearbox, then you get something that's terribly named the N Grin mode. And what that does is it gives you a 20-second boost. So basically you hit a button and you get 20 seconds of extra power. Unfortunately, on this manual, you don't get it. Hyundai used to offer two different variants of the i30N. One was the standard car, and then you also had the performance, which brought in a little bit more power. However, with this new facelifted model, the standard i30N is no longer available in the UK. The only one you can buy is the performance, which doesn't come as a huge surprise because, well, no one really bought the base car in the first place. Like the old car, we have a 2-litre turbo petrol engine in here, although power increases to 280 horsepower, which is about 5 horsepower more than the pre-facelift. You also get 392 Nm of torque, which again is a slight bump over the older car. Now, like before, it's front-wheel drive, but you now have two gearbox options. There's the regular 6-speed manual, but you now get an 8-speed dual clutch gearbox. And I assume that's what Hyundai has done its performance testing on, because this thing will go from 0 to 62 in 5.9 seconds, which is 0.2 seconds faster than the old car. And I'd imagine a lot of that is down to the snappiness of the DCT. Crucially though, it's a little bit faster than the dual clutch version of the Golf GTI. At the side, we've got a new 90-inch wheel design, which is kind of finished in a matte gunmetal grey. And I think they look stunning, and it contrasts really well with the performance blue paint scheme. Now, this is a £600 option, but I think it's well worth it because not only does it suit the i30N really well, but it also connects the car that you drive with Hyundai's motorsport division, because this is what all their rally cars run in. Now, we've not done a review of the standard i30 at Yes Auto, so I thought I'd come and sit in the back and basically show you what leg and headrooms are like, because the i30N is going to be exactly the same as the base i30. So, driver's seat's in my position, I'm just under 6 foot, and legroom is plentiful, and the same for headroom. I'm going to sit up straight, and I guess if you were 6 foot and over, you'd be absolutely fine in the back too. Only issue is there's no connectivity in the center console here, so if someone wants to charge up their phone, well, tough luck. Now, boot space. In the back, we've got 395 litres, which isn't quite as big as something like the Skoda Octavia, but in all fairness, there's no Skoda Octavia that really takes on the i30N, not even really the VRS. And the Golf GTI, well, 380 litres, it's a little bit smaller, but all in all, both cars are going to be pretty spacious. In some ways, the i30N's cabin is actually a little bit better than its major rival, the Golf GTI, because Hyundai hasn't gone crazy putting touch panels and surfaces all over the place. You still get good old-fashioned physical buttons to control everything. So while it's a relatively simple design, it all just seems to work. You'll spend most of your time gripping the steering wheel, which is really lovely to hold, especially thanks to the perforated leather grips. It also has physical buttons, including 2 in performance blue, one changing the driving mode and the other putting it in N mode, which is everything in its most hardcore setting. And you also get these optional sport seats, which are lovely with this kind of suede-y effect in the middle, and they also grip your sides really nicely. It's not all great though, because while it's a nice simple design and relatively intuitively laid out, it's all a little bit dull, and in some cases just a bit old-fashioned. For instance, the infotainment screen, while it has been updated, can be a little bit on the laggy side and is still quite dreary to look at. It does, however, score points for the N mode menu, because you can customize different performance elements of the car in immensely geeky detail. Having said that, I'm a bit disappointed that we get analog dials with a very small TFT screen in the middle, particularly as the cheaper i20N and also the iKona N SUV get fully digital cockpits. And the overall build quality can feel like a bit of a letdown. So while touch points like the steering wheel and gear lever are absolutely on point, there are some elements like the buttons and also the plastics around the center console that just feel a tad on the cheap side. So you might feel a bit cheesed off because you're going to be spending £33,000 to get your hands on an i30N. But most of this car's rivals, like the Golf GTI and the Civic Type R, all major on driving over interior quality. So I think it's time we took the i30N out on the road. What made the pre-facelift i30N so special is that while the interior felt a little bit on the cheap side, quite Hyundai, the actual underpinnings of the car felt as though they'd been put together by somebody who really knew what they were doing. Kind of German performance car levels of good engineering. And there's a reason for that. It's because a chap called Albert Biermann runs Hyundai's N division, and Biermann used to head up BMW's M division. So it doesn't really come as a huge surprise that the i30N was a great driver's car, because it came from the guy who masterminded many M3s and M5s. But the pre-facelift had a little bit of a problem of where it was extremely firm. But now we've got a new suspension layout in this new i30N, things are definitely a lot better. I've got the car in normal mode, so we've got the suspension in its softest setting, and I'm on a road that usually sends cars all over the place. And yes, there's a bit of jiggle in the i30N, but that's kind of what you'd expect from something that's a little more performance focused, and we've also got quite big wheels on here at 19 inches. It is, however, a lot more civilized than something like a Honda Civic Type R, which yes has more power and is a lot more hardcore in nature, but as something that can soften up when you need to, the i30N, this new version, is a big improvement over the old car. So along with the new suspension, we've also got a bit more power. It's only 5 horsepower, so really there doesn't feel like a big step up over the old model. But what is impressive is that it's now compliant with the latest and most strictest EU emission laws. So it's actually quite admirable that they've managed to extract a little bit more power while making its engine more eco-friendly. What I will say though is, even when you have it in the most hardcore setting, The only thing I will say though is that if you open up the exhaust valve, it does sound a little quieter than it did before. Only a little bit though. Still sounds good though. I don't know if you can hear that, but you get a little crackle of the exhaust when you change gear in N mode. And what that is basically the system is dropping a little bit of fuel into the exhaust to give you those pops and bangs, because no engine today really is going to be doing those backfires and pops and bangs by itself naturally, so they artificially do it, and in this thing it just sounds really, really, really good. While it's not the most powerful front-wheel drive hot hatch there is, that goes to the likes of the Honda Civic Type R and above, 280 horsepower through the front wheels is still a fair amount, so when you're really on it, you can get a bit of torque steer. For purists, that really could be quite frustrating, because you're wanting to get the power down and pull out of the corner as efficiently as possible, yet you're still having to wrestle the wheel a bit to get this thing to go in a straight line. But if you're like me and like a little bit of charm in your car, and that can sometimes mean a few rough edges, it just adds to the character. It just feels like a really leery car. So while it's, again, not the most powerful of its rivals, it's definitely got a lot more character than, say, a Golf GTI. And if you want to watch my review of the Golf GTI, why not click the link in the top right hand corner, because we did put it through its paces on a track and I did have a lot of fun. So I think the question really comes to, should you buy this new i30N or buy a used example, which you can find some at yesauto.co.uk. Fundamentally, they're both the same car and they don't feel worlds apart. But it's the little differences that you find on this new 2021 car which I think makes it worth buying new. That's because it just feels more livable, much more adaptable, so I can slacken off the suspension, and yes, it's still a tad on the firm side. It's not going to jiggle me around all over the place that the previous model did. Plus you have the benefit of all the new tech. But of course, you can save a lot of money by having a look at i30Ns over at yesauto.co.uk. So if you're just wanting an i30N, the used route is probably the best way to go down. But if you want the best and a proper Golf GTI beater, this new one is the car to go for.